Hello, today I want to do an end of Inazuma tier list as kind of a nice way of closing that chapter. We are getting very close to the release of Sumeru after all. Before we start, a few things. For getting everybody on the same page when talking about these characters, I will treat all 4-star characters as Constellation 6 and all 5-star characters as pure baseline, no constellations. And I'll go from top to bottom because a lot of the characters down here are placed in relation to the characters above them. And the last thing, of course, I try my best to be objective, but this will only be based on my own opinion, so there will probably be some biases going into this list. Let me just acknowledge this before we start. Alright, let's kick things off with Ayaka. Her elemental burst skill can set up the highest burst damage team in the game, of course, the jungling melt team, but her freeze teams are really great as well. Next, Raiden. Of course, incredibly versatile, can be a support, can be a DPS, and fits a lot of different team compositions. Of course, to name just the top tier one, national team. Best character in the game. Xiangling next, best pyro character in the game, possibly the only viable pyro sub DPS, just a great character overall. Next, Yelan, best hydro sub DPS in the game. For some reason they gave her a damage buff as well, which is obviously completely ridiculous, but it is what it is. Next we have Kazuha, of course a great Anemo support, has insane utility and fits a lot of different team compositions. He's basically great with every character we see so far. And the last one in top tier is Bennett. Do I even need to say anything? He's the best healer in the game due to his insane attack buff. And for some reason he's also a pyro character, so it's really easy to enable pyro resonance, which is one of the best ones. Top tier, first character Hu Tao, best single target vaporized main DPS in the game. Unfortunately, I think she is kind of reliant on her Constellation 1. Yes, you can play her with perfect stamina management at Constellation 0, but in practice I think it's just a little bit too unrealistic to pull that off consistently. Next we have Ganyu, very high sustained damage, but I think nowadays it's all about high burst damage, so she kind of got power crept by Ayaka. Nonetheless, her consistent damage is so incredibly high that I have to put her in top tier at least. Next, Child. Amazing character, but unfortunately a lot of his value comes from his Riptide effect against multiple enemies, so he's a little bit niche, so I put him in top tier. Next, Venti, exactly the same thing. Amazing against hordes of smaller enemies to suck him in and kill everything instantly, but against a boss he is pretty much useless. Next, Jingshou. Actually a higher Hydra application than Yelan, but in terms of damage and utility, she just outclasses him, so down one tier he goes, and the higher Hydra application doesn't really matter in a lot of situations. Next, Sucrose. Same as Kazuha, amazing Anemo support with a lot of utility, and in some very niche situations even better, for example, as a main DPS in a Taser team. But overall, elemental damage bonus is just more applicable to more situations than elemental mastery. Mid-tier plus, the first character here is Ayato, very high sustained damage, kind of similar to Ganyu, but unfortunately Mailshot Ganyu deals like 100 to 150k damage on every Mailshot bloom. There's no way he can compete with that, so one tier down he goes. Next we have Eula, incredible burst damage, but unfortunately she is a physical character, so not a lot of synergy in terms of elemental reactions. What ends up happening is most of the damage dealt in her team compositions is dealt by Eula, and that alone is not enough to compete with these top tier team compositions that do benefit from elemental reactions. Next we have Yoimiya, very high single target pyro damage, but unfortunately Hu Tao just does it better, so down one tier she goes. Same as this next character, Yanfei, second best vaporized main DPS. So she loses to Hu Tao, down one tier she goes. This one might be controversial. Zhongli, I think he is a jack of all trades, master of none, so he is kind of good in Mailshot Ganyu, kind of good in Eula, but gets outclassed by Anemo characters and Rosaria in each of these team compositions. And other than that, he is mostly used for geo-resonance in team compositions that will be below this. So unfortunately I can only place him in mid-tier plus. Next, Shenhe, incredible team compositions with Ayaka and Ganyu, but that makes her very niche, so mid-tier plus is the highest I can place her. Next, Mona, same thing as Shenhe, incredibly niche, only in freeze teams with these two characters. And next, Rosaria can be used as a replacement for Shenhe, but on top of that, she also deals a lot of damage with her burst skill in male teams with fast pyro application characters like these two, for example, or she can be good with Eula, for example, or even in a freeze team with Ayato. So for that, I think she deserves the same tier as Shenhe. Next, Yai, best Electro sub DPS. In terms of sustained damage, she is on par with Fischl pretty much, but of course her burst skill is what makes her pull ahead. It deals incredible damage. Next, we have Jean. Of course, when we are talking about Abyss, we need a second healer, so Jean is just the best second option after Bennett with her Viridescent set. Next, we have Diona, kind of the second best healer for a freeze team. Of course, we are talking about the Morgana team, but it's very niche, so I put her in mid-tier plus, but she could also be mid-tier, honestly. Same as Kokomi, because also only a freeze team healer. Mid-tier, first we have Ito, and let me just drag Zhao here as well, because they are very similar. Both of their team compositions have very high sustained damage, which is good, but that's pretty much it. Elemental reactions are pretty much non-existent, and when it comes to energy management against a single boss, they have problems, which is really bad for characters that are reliant on their elemental burst skill to deal damage in the first place. I think Ayato just outclasses both of them in terms of sustained damage, so down one tier they go. Next we have Diluc. Decent in vaporized teams, but unfortunately in terms of damage, they just lose to Hu Tao and these two characters. Klee, in terms of damage, she is actually quite good, but unfortunately she's very inconsistent because she has very high pyro application, so melt and vaporize on her charge attacks is very unlikely to happen. Next we have Kaching. Decent damage, but unfortunately she is reliant on charge attacks and her stamina management is just horrible. Absolutely horrible. Hazel, I think he is really fun, and he wants to be kind of like Sucrose. He has an elemental mastery buff, but unfortunately it just doesn't work as well. So he is at least 2 tiers below Sucrose in my opinion. Next we have Ningguang. My favorite character in the game. Unfortunately, she is also a Geo character, so no elemental reactions, nice burst damage, same as Eula, but often in her team compositions she does a lot of the damage on her own, and unfortunately on top of that she is also a 4-star character, so worse base stats overall. So I can only put her in mid-tier, unfortunately. Next we have Beidou, pretty good Electro sub DPS against groups, but her damage falls off against a single enemy, which is where Fischl shines. She is pretty much a boss killer. I think both of them are good in an Electro Charge team with Ayato, Overload team with Klee, or just a Hazel team, I guess. And both of them lose to Yai, so 1 tier below they go. Next we have Sarah. I think she's very niche. I think Kaching or Raiden with Kazuha can be a good Electro Mono team to set up her C6 value, but that's pretty much it. Next we have Yunjin, again another niche unit. Only good with normal attack units like, for example, Ayato or maybe even Yoimiya. And the last one in this tier will be Barbara. I think technically I value her as much as Kokomi because she does pretty much the same, but technically Kokomi's area of effect is larger, which makes it easier to apply Hydro, so I guess I dropped down Barbara 1 tier. Low tier plus, first character, Razor, physical main DPS, not a lot of synergy with elemental reactions, and he can't make up for that fact with higher 5-star base stats like Eula can. So in terms of damage, he just falls behind to mid-tier characters. Next we have Noelle, actually decent damage, but the most energy-starved character in the game. Her elemental skill literally provides 0 energy generation. You can pretty much only use her if you're fighting hordes of small enemies that constantly die like flies and feed energy into her. Next we have Albedo. Very niche team compositions, only usable in Ito, Zhao or Noelle teams, and he only provides consistent damage, no elemental reactions again. So this is the highest I can realistically place him. Next, this is even more so true for Goro, only usable in 2 team compositions, specifically with Albedo and Noelle or Ito. So again, not very high quality team compositions, but he can be a healer, so I bump him up from low tier to low tier plus. Next, Shinobu, again, very niche, only used to enable superconduct with Eula as a healer, and that's pretty much it. She only provides damage otherwise, and it's very underwhelming. She can't even use something like the Thrilling Tales like Barbara can, so no utility whatsoever. Low tier, first we have Amber. Unfortunately, the best thing you can do is a Mimi, Baron, Bunny, Melt build. Good damage, but the setup is way too long, the cooldown is way too long, it's pretty much a gimmick, it's not a viable build in my opinion. Next we have Lisa, same thing, good damage on her elemental skill, too long setup, too long cooldown, gimmick. And her elemental burst skill has nice electro application, but I think it's not enough to put her in low tier plus and close to these characters even, so she belongs in low tier. Next we have Kaya. His elemental application rate for Cryo is pretty decent, but his damage is only okay, so in direct comparison to Rosaria, I think I have to put at least 2 tiers between them. He gets so heavily outclassed by her. Next, we have Shen. Very minor utility for physical carries, like for example Razor or Eula. I don't think it's even worth it, so low tier in my opinion. Next, Shonyun, great elemental burst skill, but unfortunately his elemental skill ruins too many team compositions with his cryo infusion. If he just had some off-field cryo damage, I think he would have at least been mid-tier, honestly. Next, we have Toma, very low pyro application, very low damage, very low tier. Next, we have Shichi, useless. Sayu, this one is tough, of course great for exploring and definitely worth building for that, and even for combat on paper she looks good, a Viridescent set healer, same as Jean, and she even has some mobility, but unfortunately her energy generation is just way too weird, you can't really reliably get your burst skill off, so she's kind of useless in that sense. And the last character, in case you have her, is Aloy. Unfortunately her Icy Quill mechanic is just terribly designed. Getting that cryo infusion in actual combat just doesn't really work well. Her skills deal decent damage, but that alone is not enough to place her any higher, and it doesn't really help that her base stats make her look like a 4-star character with no constellations available. Alright, that's it, my final list. I assume a lot of you just skipped ahead to see the entire thing and have no idea how it ended up like this. The quintessence is, in Abyss you don't care about sustained damage, you want to kill things quickly to skip as many mechanics as possible. For example, you don't want to spend your time chasing around Magokenki, why would you do that if you could just kill him before he starts teleporting? So the top half of this list ended up with key characters who enable teams with high burst damage, and the bottom half is very heavy on sustained damage. And just in case if you aren't familiar with the term burst damage, I'm not referring to elemental burst skills, it means a very high spike of front-loaded damage and then the damage output falls off pretty hard until the cooldowns are back up. These damage windows are usually referred to as burst windows, and in Genshin specifically the goal is obviously to end the fight or the phase before the damage drop off. That's it, let me know if you agree or disagree, I'm curious which characters are top tier for you. Anyway, stay tuned for more videos, until then have fun and bye bye.